Welcome, everybody, to another rendition of The Lone Wolf Show. I'm the Lone Wolf, and you are watching www.witchcrafttv.online. And this is the special WitchCon presenter series. And I have a WitchCon presenter backstage. But before we introduce him right here on the station, we're going to roll that intro. Levi, Rowland, everybody. How you doing, Levi?
Doing well. How are you?
Man, it's great to have you on the station, man. I've been watching WitchCon for years.
I'm so glad. I'm happy to be here.
So tell me, how did you get involved in WitchCon?
Well, I taught a Hex Fest, which is a big festival that they also put on in August. And then I like the comfort of doing it from home. I'm not going to lie. I work from home. So the fact that I can teach witchcraft without having to go somewhere is kind of a blessing. But I also just got involved because I really liked the idea of having so many presenters and you can go back and watch classes. So unlike a live festival, if you miss something to the schedule, you can just go back and watch like 4 different classes and you never lose them. So it's nice to have the archive.
So in your bio, it says that you're a high priest,
hmm
and you lead the. I don't want to pronounce it wrong. I'm going to try. I'm going to try not to butcher this thing. Pontchartrain,
Poncha, Pontchartrain.
Pontchartrain, and that really does sound like wicked New Orleans. Like I spent a lot of times in New Orleans. Like I kind of get the lingo a little bit. So it's right outside of New Orleans, and
hmm
it's a teaching coven. And it's the temple of the line of the Alexandrian craft. So is that like an outer order of the Alexandrians?
No, it's a specific lineage. So like the lineage that my training comes from the Temple of the Mother, which was Maxine's coven in London.
Right on.
So that's sort of like just the lineage I trace through, and sort of there's a community of us, and it lets people know sort of where you're from a little bit. But it's just it's not an outer court or anything like that.
I see. So how did you get involved in the Alexandrian tradition?
It's so funny because I think so many people who get involved in witchcraft or paganism, they have a long history with practicing magic or like being involved in paganism or getting into casting spells. I didn't have that. I was a Catholic for most of my youth, and I chose my poison. My parents were Protestants, so I was a convert to the Catholic Church for a long time. And then I left that and went on a spiritual sort of quest. And you never in a million years would have convinced me that I would have ended up in witchcraft. It was like the furthest thing from my mind. And it just kept appearing as this calling for me. I know that is very, sounds very Christian, but like I just wanted to pursue it and I couldn't get it out of my head. And I reached out to a coven and the rest is history. But yeah, I don't have like a history of being deeply involved in that, and so it was a shock to me, and this is many years ago. I've been most of my adult life I've been an initiate, but it was a shock to me. So that kind of makes it feel almost like it was fated, right? Like this is where I was supposed to be, whether I liked it or not. Sometimes I think the gods just like put you places, how much choice we have in the matter, I think is debatable.
And that makes a lot of sense. When I spent time in New Orleans, it was a huge Catholic presence there, and there's actually a huge Catholic like temple church right across the street and right off of St. Louis Street, where Marie Laveau is buried and things. So I definitely can understand like the Catholic influence in that particular city and things. Yeah, so that's a really interesting thing. You're an author of a couple books. The
Mhm.
author the art cosmic, the magic of traditional astrology,
Yep.
teaching tool for those interested in traditional astrology. Tell me about that book and where you were and who published it.
So it's published through Warlock Press, and the Art Cosmic is sort of my love letter to traditional astrology.
Cool.
It's anybody who gets into astrology, you sort of have to pick your lane a little bit because there's so many different schools of it. It's not like one thing. And I really fell in love with a lot of texts, very traditional texts in astrology when I was writing it. I did this huge like research thing. I had this whole like astrological library, and something about the old European traditional astrology just it was so different than what you encounter sometimes when you get into astrology. It's much more fatalistic sometimes. I like to joke about trad astrology. It can be a little dark. When you're going through these old textbooks on the stars, you'll look up some conjunction or something and it'll be like death by fire, like great tragedy. It's just very like honest sometimes. But yeah, it's also an exploration of planetary magic, which is just a huge framework that I love for magical workings. And yeah, that's the art cosmic is definitely my love letter to that system. And it's complicated, but once you get past sort of the mathiness of it, it really can open up your praxis in a lot of cool ways.
So when dealing in astrology, I know that, the world is a big place, and I'm pretty sure like Chinese astrology is very, very different.
Hmm.
Eastern and Western astrology is
Oh yeah.
different. How did you come in contact with that, and how did you write about that? I think Vedic astrology is different from
Oh
kind
yeah.
of Western astrology, I think.
Yeah, we tend to. A lot of people call it tropical astrology because it follows seasonal. We don't account for axial tilt in Western astrology, but Vedic astrology is what we call sidereal, meaning it factors in where the stars are. But the reason I like Western astrology so much is just because it is an integral part to sort of the Western occult tradition. If you pick up any grimoire, with a few exceptions like the Abramelin, but if you pick up any grimoire, or if you get into the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn or traditional witchcraft, it's like learning a language that once you learn unlocks a bunch of other languages. Like it's kind of like how if you learn one romance language like French or Spanish, it's easier to learn the others, right? And astrology is just one of those magical languages that kind of opens up the whole esoteric history of the West to you. Same with Kabbalah. That's another one. Like there's just a couple languages that are super important in terms of what they built for the West and in terms of Western magic, and that's the one that I like. I do have some experience with Vedic and Chinese astrology. They're very, very different. They have almost no relation to what we do in European astrology, but I like them all. But it's obviously the one that was the most impactful on my practice, right? Because as a witch and somebody who's into Western occultism, like it's all planetary magic. Everybody's out there shouting at angels in the sky.
So you mentioned the Golden Dawn magical tradition. How much of an impact do you think the Order of the Golden Dawn magical tradition has had on contemporary Wicca?
That is a very good question, and very you'll get a lot of different answers from different witches. Some I know a lot of initiates, including in my own line, who are very reticent to sort of be like, oh, a lot of this comes from the Golden Dawn. They're very uncomfortable with that. They want witchcraft to be this very, very separate thing. I I am comfortable admitting that I think the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn had a massive influence on contemporary witchcraft, how we structure circles, how we understand initiation, all of that. But it wasn't there. A lot of it wasn't theirs to begin with either. It comes from Masonry and the French occult revival. That Eliphas Levi and whatnot. That was translated into English by a lot of the Golden Dawn leaders like Arthur Waite and whatnot. So I'm comfortable admitting that I think Golden Dawn magic is part and parcel of contemporary witchcraft in terms of the ceremony of it, the structure. I do think the spirits are very different in terms of like what you're tapping into. I don't think that initiatory craft taps into the same spiritual egregore as the Golden Dawn or Thelema or anything like that. But structurally, we share a lot of common language.
So I'm not the sharpest tool on the altar. What does egregore mean?
So egregore for me is, it's a common term in a lot of like esoteric things where you have this sort of spiritual entity that's created by the praxis and belief of a group of people. So, like, you have a Christian egregore, you have a Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn egregore, you have a witchcraft egregore, you can have even tools can have it. So some readers, for example, will say something like the Rider Waite Tarot has a different egregore than the Marseille deck, right? Like, because they've had all of this belief that's been pumped into them. And a lot of early 20th century occultists kind of recognized that. They called it an egregore. I'm actually not sure where that comes from, if it comes from Theosophy or maybe it does come from the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, but I don't think so. But it's that sort of cloud of belief, that sort of existent entity that's built from all that praxis and belief that you're tapping into on some level.
So your second publication and book is Mother Ecstasy: Transformation and the Great Goddess. This work is an exploration of the goddess religion and a guide for anyone wishing to approach a mysticism rooted in the divine, particularly the goddess divine.
Mhm.
Tell me about where you were when you wrote the book, who were you published with, and why was the book written?
It's also through Warlock Press. Mother is the book I wanted to write. The Art Cosmic, I think, is more it's very useful. Like, if you're trying to, the Art Cosmic can teach you how to do like a horoscope, right? Or in a traditional way. But Mother is a book I wrote from emotion, like, and from devotion. It's not a how-to book. It's not a intro to anything in particular. It's just an exploration of goddess religion, because I do consider witchcraft a goddess religion. I mean, yes, we have a god. We have a god and a goddess. Both forms of the divine are honored in every circle, but God the Father has a lot of fans in this world. He's doing fine. Like, it's, I know, the male images of God are pretty dominant, but it's
Hail
also just,
Hermes.
yeah, they're doing just fine. But I think I wrote it because there has been a sort of backlash against the goddess in contemporary witchcraft, in my opinion. This really, really took hold with the sort of rise of what people call traditional witchcraft, which muddies the waters, because traditional to whom, like, which really focused on the devil, right? And different forms of that, some sort of horned god, oftentimes associated with the Christian devil, but in a folkloric kind of way. They really weren't comfortable with the goddess movement. And there's been this incredible, almost wrenching of the goddess out of contemporary witchcraft. And I just don't like that. Like, I think that it's one of the few things that the witchcraft revival actually gave to the world. The occult is incredibly male centric. It just is. And I mean, of
Right.
course, there are fantastic female occultists, that were very influential, but it's been incredibly male dominated, particularly Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn styled magic and things like
Right.
that, Thelema. And so witchcraft comes along, and you have all these women. You have not Dion Fortune, excuse me. You have Doreen Valiente and Patricia Crowther and Maxine Sanders and Lois Bourne, and those are the people who are leading it. And I don't know, to see that sort of poo-pooed because it's not historical or whatever, was not my fave. And so Mother is a sort of my way of showing people that it is deep. I think there's this misconception that goddess religion is sort of all sitting around and drumming in the woods, and somebody's got on a pair of fairy wings, and that's that. But if you want the real stuff, quote unquote, then you have to go to the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn or Crowley or whatever. Uh, and I don't believe that. I think that goddess religion can be just as, mystically rich as any other mystic tradition. And I think it used to be historically, the, mystery cults and whatnot. So that's why I wrote it. I wanted to explore that you can have incredibly rich experiences religiously in goddess religion.
Where can we find these two books at? Can we find them right on warlockpress.com? Is that
You can find them through Warlock Press, Amazon, Hex and Salem,
Amazon?
yeah, Omen.
Which one of those two books seems to have a better it is better received by the public?
Oh, that's easy. It's the astrology one. Anytime that I teach a class on astrology, the room is full. Like when I do Hexfest or something, if I'm going to tell people how to read their charts, they're all showing up. They're bringing their birthdays, their boyfriend's birthdays. Like, they're texting their mom to find out what hour they were born. People love astrology. But if you talk about the gods, it's a little bit of a thinner crowd. There's a pretty hefty secular kind of vibe in contemporary witchcraft, which is not my vibe, but it is sort of the zeitgeist right now.
I mean, I really love astrology. I mean, the zodiac, the planetary influences, when things are conjunct and things, and I just see, like, in my own path, I see like a lot of like things that have like synchronicity bells that ring in my head when things happen and everything. Who were your inspiration for folks in the craft or magical community, occult community that taught astrology? That you look up to.
I think for witches, Patricia Crowther, who was a Gardnerian high priestess, she did a whole series of rituals based on the zodiac that you can still find prints of. I have a print of it. Working, I can't remember the exact title, but she gives a rite for each sign, and it's very rooted in her witchcraft practice too. So love her. Benjamin Dykes, he's a great traditional astrologer. He's a PhD. He teaches a lot on that. Chris Brennan's great if you're into Hellenistic astrology, particularly Hellenistic though. Like he's really into that. Mine's more European, like late early modern kind of time period. Uh, but yeah, Benjamin Dykes is great. Robert Zoller, he was incredibly influential in writing about like the lots, which everybody talks about now, like the lot of fortune, and he brought a lot of that back to people who had lost it in Western astrology. But yeah, I think that'd be a good list.
So, two books published. Is there inspiration for a third?
I don't know. I think about that sometimes. I think as I get older, my interests in witchcraft just get weirder, and sometimes they're not super marketable. Like, it's one thing to like get people to read about astrology, but when you get into this really weird sort of like mystical, theurgic kind of witchcraft that I love, that's harder. I'm not so sure it can even be put in book form necessarily. And I think that happens to a lot of practitioners. You just get to a point where you're kind of so far into it that it's hard to step away from it. It just becomes so. If I was going to write on something else, it probably would be religious, the way Mother is. But I'm also very cognizant that that's not necessarily popular.
Once again, I'm not the sharpest tool on the altar. What does cognizant mean?
Uh, Cognizant? Did I say
Yeah,
cognizant?
I think so.
Oh, like I'm aware of it, right? Like
Oh, see.
yeah, just aware. Like I'm very aware that like that's not the zeitgeist right now. People really want spells. They want witchcraft to be all about like how do I get rid of my
Yeah,
ex-lover? How do I get money? How do I and
right.
people hate my answers. Like I was a reader for many years. I don't do it anymore, but and people hate those answers when they're like, how do I
Tarot,
get yeah, I did tarot for years in astrology, and people would be like, how do I get a better lover? And I'm like, work on yourself.
right.
And or
Sign
they're
up.
like, "Yeah, how do I get money?" And I'm like, "Go back to school, like, be a better worker." Like, it's like, we there's a phrase that Maxine Sanders, who's one of the co-founders of my tradition, uses a lot. I don't think she originated it, but always use your backbone before your wishbone. So, I'm not
No
a big fan
doubt.
of yeah, it's like people who are just like, What spell do I need? What's the greatest potion to get rid of anxiety?" And I'm like, "I don't know, Xanax." Like, it's,
Right.
like, benzodiazepines. I'm
Common
keeping
sense ain't so common, right?
yeah. So yeah, I'm not always the most palatable teacher. Sometimes when I do classes, I can tell people are like, "Yeah, but what about this like daily stuff?" And I'm like, "Eh,
So outside of covenant responsibilities and writing, you co-host a very, very popular podcast in the witchcraft community called Covendom,
yep."
and it's been on for a very, very long time. And I almost feel like if I was to rate it, which I don't have much say in the community, but it's almost like a staple. Where did you find, or how did you come in contact with being a part of such a fiery show that just keeps going and going and going?
I was in the New Orleans coven. I currently am I run the Pontchartrain Coven now, but at the time I was in the New Orleans Coven, and Brian, who was the high priest, was like, "Let's do a show," because I think we wanted to just do one that was really rooted in British traditional witchcraft. Because most shows about witchcraft are not. they're very eclectic, and so there's just just the idea of having alternate voices out there that spoke for the tradition. I think was it was definitely on our mind, and so I jumped in on YouTube.
What do you think the pros and cons are of being an eclectic coven?
I've never been in one. Um, I've never been an eclectic witch. I think all forms of witchcraft. Maxine says we're a scavenger religion. We take what feeds us, what works. But I've never been an eclectic. It's never interested me. I wanted something that had a built-in sort of system in it, because I think it's just that's the con of being eclectic to me, is it doesn't have that. And it's very hard when you're constantly having to be the architect of everything you do. Like every single ritual, every single system, every single spell, every single anything, you're doing it from scratch in a lot of places. And having a built-in structure that's passed on with, the sort of wisdom and power of multiple people, it gives you a structure where you're not constantly having to reinvent the wheel. And so that's the biggest con, I think, of eclectic craft. I also think that it depends on the person. Some people are going to thrive in an eclectic space and some people aren't. If you want witchcraft to be just about spells, then that's what you're going to want, is you're going to want something eclectic. But if you want it to be a religion, that you're a part of and that you serve in a priesthood of, well, then you're going to pick a tradition, right?
Hmm. So, as with WitchCon that's happening on February 20th to the 23rd, WitchCon's been around for a few years now. Were you involved in the very first year of WitchCon?
I think so. I think I've taught a class each year.
So with WitchCon, there's an archive. Like once you sign up for WitchCon and you're a part of WitchCon, you have access to, I'm pretty sure, all of the classes and everything. What are some of the classes that you have taught at WitchCon?
That's a very good question. You're throwing. I taught one on Gnosticism and sort of like introducing witches to Gnostic texts, that are which are things that I really like. I've taught on astrology before, and then I have taught on meditation and ritual ecstasy. Which is much more what I'm doing for Hexfest this year. And then this year, I'm teaching a class called Magical Lies, Half Truths that Impact Your Praxis. At least I hope I get that name right. Yeah, Half Truths that Limit Your Practice. But it's called Magical Lies, where I'm going through some assumptions that sometimes I think seekers make when they're looking into starting or deepening their practice that I think can be harmful, or take you down sort of bad roads. But yeah, I think that's yeah. I know I did Gnosticism, astrology, uh, planetary magic, because that was art cosmic stuff.
What's your take on the definition of what a seeker is?
Hmm. I think it's anybody for whom they realize that there is something beneath their daily experience that they want to explore. That reality holds maybe some mystery to it, or some depth of experience, or some sort of, they know it's there, and they're not satisfied with without having it. There's this, sort of hunger that develops in them to sort of explore the world beneath the world, or the the just past reality, and they go for it. That's, I think, a seeker is somebody, and I think that there are different levels. Some people, are seeking just for relief. Some people are seeking for real service to something. But it's usually that it's a sort of looking and not being able to accept just that bare bones experience, and knowing that there's something beyond it or beneath it that you want to scratch at.
So I feel like the Golden Dawn magical tradition had certain elements to the craft in contemporary times that bring forth a lot of ceremonial ritual to the craft. Um, uh, do you think that ceremonial and ritual is important with contemporary witchcraft?
Yes. I think that the magic circle is a microcosm of the world, right? So rituals, for me, we have a very strong belief in Alexandrian witchcraft where we say we don't like empty ritual. So like there's nothing in the ritual that's just like, well, this is what they told us to do, so that's why we do it. Like everything has a purpose, everything is a teaching tool and is built for, building up the power in a circle. But ritual to me is the lived experience of wisdom, right? It's one thing to know something intellectually, like I know this thing about the world, but ritual allows you to experience it in a very real way. It's where you're activated in every world, from the mental all the way down to the physical. So I do think it's necessary. I'm not a big fan of. I think that there's too much. How would I word this? Like there's too much in contemporary witchcraft of this sort of like nothing matters, right? Like nothing matters. It's just whatever you want it to be. Just it's all about intention. I don't think that's true. I think how you live your life does matter, like and how you work things out. And ritual gives you the space to do that. But I think it's that's the whole point of ceremony. In magic. I'm not saying all ceremonies are like that. I mean, there's lots of stupid, dry ceremonies that are just ritualism. But I think ritual gives you the opportunity to experience living wisdom. It's happening in the circle. It's actually manifested in the body, as opposed to just being a thought you have.
Thank you so much for that. That's good clarification. My next question has to do with something that has to do with divine and deity and the many gods and goddesses that are on the planet. And a lot of the reason why I started the Lone Wolf Show and Witchcraft TV and podcasting and things is to try to reach out to the wisest people of humanity that I could. And with that being said, I have a question that I really have a hard time with, particularly in conjunction with Hermetics. Did the gods create us, or did we create the gods?
You're making me think. There's a famous quote by Cicero where he said, "If the gods didn't exist, it would be necessary to invent them." But I don't. I would say that I'm very theistic. I believe in God. With a capital G. We just tend, in our tradition, we believe that there is one source for the divine, and then it is manifested as a god and a goddess because that's easier for our brains to understand than an absolute. It's too difficult, according to our tradition, to sort of sit around and contemplate the absolute. It would drive you mad, right? You wouldn't be able to function, because you wouldn't care about daily life. You wouldn't like. So the god and the goddess are sort of the first emanations of that source. I do believe the gods are realities. I don't think that they are mental creations from humans, right? But I think all things participate in the one, right? So it's sort of like, did we create them? Did they create us? Well, it's all just happening all at once, right? These are, when you're talking about the divine, you're talking about something that exists outside of time. So the question doesn't really apply to them because who came first? Well, there is no first. Who came before? Well, there is no before, right? Like at the level of divinity, there's no before and after. There is only being. That's it. There's no there's no before, after, during, first, second, chicken, egg. Like it's all emanated. It's all happening all at once. So I think all things, the individual gods, ourselves, all of nature, physical reality, I think all of it exists inside of that divinity. It's not separable from it. I think that's a great failing of a lot of Western Christianity is that it's created this huge gap between nature and the divine. That's very Protestant. This idea that there is the other, and God is so far away and so removed from existence. But I don't think that way. I think it's all knitted together.
My last question for the interview is, what would be your advice to new seekers of contemporary witchcraft that just starting on the path, and what would be your advice to them?
My biggest advice would be to jump in and actually devote yourself to something. I think that it is so. easy to pick up witchcraft like a hobby. And I don't think I'm going to be really frank. I don't think you're going to get anything out of that. I think there are better hobbies. It's just, it can be, for dabblers, I think witchcraft can be dangerous because I think it can seed things like paranoia in people, superstition, ego. It's like, oh, I'm so special, I'm chosen, I need to heal the world. Or it can be like, everybody's cursing me, so I have to pay thousands of dollars to have them removed. Or, that's what I see in a lot of seekers who don't go very deep into it, is they get stuck at that level of exchange, right? It's all a marketplace. And so my advice is, and this is I think, very not the common advice. Like, most people give the advice of go slow, take your time. I'm going to give the opposite advice. Like, just go. Like, if you want to, I used to say it like this: go out into the woods, scream into the darkness. Eventually something will answer you. But you're going to have to go into the darkness. You're going to have to go into the woods. Like, it's not going to happen because you created a vision board, from the Walgreens. You're going to have to go scream into the void until it talks back to you.
In the very heart of witchcraft, we thank you, Levi Rowland, for coming on the Lone Wolf Show on www.witchcrafttv.online. Make sure you tune in to the next episode of Covendom, who is it has become a staple in the witchcraft community for podcasters. And also make sure to check out Levi Rowland for WitchCon 2026, starting February 20th to the 23rd. Thank you so much, Sir
Thank you.
Levi, for coming on the Lone Wolf Show. It's been an honor and a privilege.
It was a pleasure.
I'll be watching you progress, and I hope to see that third book. And make sure to keep it right here on Witchcraft TV.